Right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute honor to be here today with Matt Tissier. How are you doing, Matt?
Very good, thanks, Nick. And you?
I'm good. Now, first of all, how much do you know about DJing drum and bass?
Very little.
Okay, good, because that's about as much as I know about football, and that was my it was my former career before COVID. So we're on an even playing field there. I know absolutely,
Absolutely.
and that's not what this interview is going to be about at all. Um, but is it correct that you played for Southampton and never left? Is that right?
That was my only professional club, yes.
Yeah. And is that a rarity?
Pretty rare, yeah. I would say, blimey, maybe one in every 500 or maybe 1,000 footballers do that.
Yeah. And I presume that you got some offers, but was that loyalty to your hometown?
A little bit of loyalty, yeah. A little bit of family circumstances. So yeah, different reasons at different times, really.
Yeah. I just wonder if it's at all relevant, that little factoid, to what's going on now.
um, I've wondered that myself, actually. I do have a sense of loyalty. Certainly, I think if people do right by me, then I want to do right by them.
Yeah.
And Southampton gave me my chance to be a professional footballer and to achieve my dream of playing for my country. And yeah, I felt like I owed them something for that.
That's so interesting because I yeah, just mentioned I was a DJ, but I stayed at the bar that I fell in love with for 7 years until things sort of collapsed, and then it was COVID shortly afterwards, and here we are. But it was kind of a similar tug that kept me there. It's like I can earn more in other places, but like this is the place that gave me a shot, and I really
Yeah,
love it. And I did a lot of my networking. Like I got big gigs through having that little one. So
yeah,
similar sort of thing.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. There's nothing wrong with a bit of loyalty, and it's you also I also took into account when deciding on whether I wanted to move or not was my personal happiness. And personally, playing football for Southampton, I was incredibly happy. I loved my job, and I didn't see the need to go and uproot that for a few extra quid because money was never the reason that I played football.
Yeah, well, I suppose you also had a taste of the bigger stuff as well, playing internationally, and you again we've got might have quite a few similarities here. I got gigs up and down the country, and I just didn't like them as much as playing in my little bar because it was it was the same faces, and that was a
Yeah,
part of it, you know.
no, absolutely.
So yeah, there is the glitzy glamour stuff, and it's interesting that maybe once you got a taste for it, you see, nah, maybe that's not for me, or maybe it is for certain people and not for others.
Yeah, as I said, I wouldn't expect everyone to make the same decisions I made because we're all different as human beings, and I certainly don't have any ill feeling towards players who I played with at Southampton who decided to go a different way and go and earn some more money and perhaps win some trophies to the clubs that they went to. So each to their own has always been my motto.
Oh no, absolutely. It's just interesting. It's an interesting pattern and a good starting point. So now let's move on to the meat. All the bullshit of the past 3 years. Um, I mean, you were one of these characters that was like, an early blue tick, basically. One of the guys on Twitter that was in the pack of people that were talking out against this, like Right Said Fred and Gillian McKeith. There were a few people that I just remember being there early that had something to lose on the public stage.
Yeah.
Do you remember when it was that you like leapt in?
Oh, very early. Before we even went into lockdowns, I think I put out a tweet probably early March, I think it was. I'd be fascinated to go back and look at it now. When things were starting to ramp up in the media, it might be in mid-March. And I simply put out a tweet which said, "Why are we making such a fuss for I mean, it was probably poorly worded when I look back at it now, but it was something along the lines of, why are we making such a big fuss about this virus that only affects the really elderly or those with already damaged immune systems? Something along those lines. And this is before we even went into the first lockdown. So I was on it quite early. But kind of when I look back on that now, it was actually a pretty accurate assessment of what came about. There was evidence that it only affected, the really. I mean, the average age of the person that died from COVID was about the same age as the average age that somebody normally dies in this country. So why we went to such great trouble to destroy our whole economy and our entire children's education system, and pretty much a load of businesses, small and medium-sized businesses as well. I found it just bizarre that the government would actually go to those lengths to do that, given the demographic of people that it affected. It didn't really affect people with healthy immune systems and young people. Okay, there'll be odd occasions that it did. And I get that, but we've always had to live with that, and we've never shut down our society before because of it.
Well, I think you're dwelling on something really, really important. We've been very focused on vaccine damage because it really is the number one issue until stuff starts being done about it and we see some change.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it can almost make us forget about the damage of lockdown and everything that you've just described, because it's massive, and it was massive from day one. I mean, is it irreparable? We're talking levels that, and I feel like nobody really wants to think about that at the moment, no matter what side you're on. There's not actually a lot of discussion going on about the damage of all of those policies compared to the focus on the injuries from the vaccine. And obviously that's incredibly important. But do you know what I mean? It seems to have got lost.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they want you to think. They want you to forget about it. They want you to not realize that the catastrophic decisions that they made back then are now playing out in what's happening in our current society with the the cost of living increases that we've seen. They'll try and blame it on the war in the Ukraine, obviously, without acknowledging actually that the energy prices had already gone up considerably before the war in Ukraine had already started. All these little things, the government and their lackeys in the media will continue to try to brainwash people that they will try and forget that and just gloss over it, as they're doing with the vaccine injured, and they just expect everybody to fall for the propaganda again.
Are you alarmed, as I am, that it's generally the same voices? When like you gave a fantastic speech in London the other week, and you said as part of it, like, I shouldn't really be here. This is a day for the bereaved and injured. But I think you really, really added something to that. It was great.
Thank you.
But what struck me is it's been the same faces for 3 years, and it's really shocking to me that all the anti-vaxxers, like your Piers Corbyn and Fiona and people, why are they on the front line of helping the vaccine injured? The same people. That drives me absolutely nuts.
It's incredible that people will still throw those slurs around, and incredible that more people who know what's going on and are just too cowardly to speak up because they think it's going to affect their lives too much, might affect their income too much. Yet, in effect, what they're actually doing is enabling the tyranny to continue for way longer than it ever should do. And if that carries on, then I'm afraid their jobs will go anyway, and they will become obsolete. Their jobs will go to artificial intelligence at some point along the way, and they'll be probably sat in a room very old thinking, blimey, wish I'd have spoken out a few years ago.
Hmm. Yeah, see, it's weird. I've kind of divided the world into the matrix and the not matrix. So I saw a video yesterday, one of my friends put up of the new, she called them the NWO barriers at Sainsbury's. And I think they only open if once you've paid for your shopping or something like that. It's really connected in. They're not just opening because there's
Oh, wow.
yeah, you can only leave once you've paid or something on that kind of level. And I kind of look at that and I just go, well, you I know you have to go to the supermarket for some things, but you kind of should be aiming to go to the market and the butcher and all of this stuff anyway, because they took such a nasty hit, you know.
Yeah. We try and do that in our household. We go to the local greengrocers and get all our fruit and vegetables from there, and we try and steer away as much as we can from the supermarkets.
Well, I think it's all sort of one big thing. And like, because it's really, this was an assault from the public sector as far as I can tell, on the wealth creating sector, which is what I like to call it rather than the private sector, because the public sector doesn't create any wealth. It just takes yours and divvies it out amongst itself. And it kind of looks like it's almost hit this size where it's just sort of swallowing everything up. And this is why I mean, I know for a fact that you're in the camp of people that is not looking at politics and going, right, maybe we can vote our way out of this. Maybe Richard Tice is our boy.
Definitely not, I'm afraid. I think Richard shot himself in the foot with the comments he made about Andrew Bridgen, quite frankly. And I think he's done his damage, his party irreparable damage. And I don't think there is really a way to vote yourself out of this. The whole system is corrupt. Red or blue are two cheeks of the same arse, and there's nobody else big enough to try and challenge that. I think the only way it changes is to tear down the system and start all over again. But the turkeys aren't going to be voting for Christmas.
Were you aware of this kind of stuff prior to 2020?
Not really. Not really. I'd kind of gone about my life very quietly, and with as minimal interference from the government as possible. I've always had a job. I've never had to rely on benefits. I paid my taxes, and I just kind of kept my head down and just got on with my life, and I was enjoying that life up until 2020 when everything changed and the government started interfering a little bit too much for my liking, and I didn't like it. And I thought, no, I'm not having this. I'm speaking up. I'm going to try and do something about this and try and make other people aware that this isn't normal. We had a pandemic preparedness plan in place before, and they completely threw that out the window to copy what everyone was doing in China. Now, since when have we ever copied and believed anything that's come out of China? We know that everything that comes out of there is propaganda. And yet here we were. It was like our institutions had been taken over by the CCP. That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah, I remember watching early streams on Twitter of Lawrence Fox. He was very angry about this very early on, and he was calling our Prime Minister Boris Johnson in a sort of Chinese voice. Because that was exactly what was going on. I interviewed Bob Moran quite a while ago, and he was saying, well, lockdown, surely, if that's on the table at all, should be the very last thing you try once you've exhausted all other options. Not the first thing that you leap to.
No, that's exactly right. And how more people didn't see through the bullshit was incredible to me. Some of my good friends who I thought were incredibly intelligent and really switched on, and yet they could not see through the bullshit. And I was just gobsmacked. I really was, and it's been quite frustrating, I think, at times. 3 years trying to get through to people, but I think the tide has turned quite significantly, if I'm honest. Certainly in my circle that I noticed, my circle of family and friends, there has been a big shift in attitudes towards the government. You ask them now if they would do the lockdowns again or wear masks again, and there's a considerable amount of them that were quite happy to do that 2.5 years ago, who would now say, no, we've seen the evidence now. We've seen the scientific studies. Masks don't work. Lockdowns have made no difference when you compare it to other countries that didn't lock down. So what was the point? All it did was absolutely trash our economy. And people are still wondering why we've got a cost of living crisis when they just printed billions of pounds and bribed people with the furlough money to stay at home and comply with their ridiculous rules.
Yeah,
which I didn't comply to.
Good man, obviously.
Obviously.
Actually, I mean, it was fantastic weather during that first lockdown, and
it was.
I remember, they said you can only exercise outside for 15 minutes a day, and I lived by some rather lovely hills at that point, and I would go walking in the baking sun for like hours. I'm talking hours, because there was nothing else to do, was there?
Yeah.
Wasn't allowed to see anyone. And I remember taking a little selfie for Instagram and going, I'm breaking the law right now. And just actually thinking about it, going, well, I mean, if somebody caught me, I'd just explain that this is all nonsense, and not that the pandemic was nonsense, but that the idea of arresting a man in the middle of a field is like, I thought we were there, and yeah, I'm having flashbacks right now to that footage of the police going up to people in parks when they were actually allowed to be there. This is when lockdown is being like, or maybe we're in tears or something, but the police are just there to keep an eye on what exactly? What are you here to prevent?
It's amazing how they were able to keep an eye on COVID lawbreakers, but don't give a shit when people are burglaring your house.
No.
They're not patrolling the streets then, are they? Looking to see where the burglars are, but they were happy to patrol the parks to see if anyone was breaking COVID rules. The police, my opinion of the police has just gone down so much in the last 2 or 3 years. Honestly, the way that they have behaved, I have lost complete and utter trust in our police force. They just completely went against the people that they're supposed to be on the side of, law-abiding people, and sided with the government. And that for me was a line they should never have crossed.
Yeah, I find it all quite sad, because I never get on with the like all cops are bastards rhetoric at all. But I just have to conclude at this point that it's not there to help us. First of all, there's even outside of pandemic stuff, there's a lot of crime, very serious crime, that you and me would never consider. I mean, it's just not even on my radar. That is completely swept under the rug and not dealt with. But this in particular, like, I'll tell you one story. It was in lockdown 2 around December of 2020, when a friend of mine was having a secret party in the middle of London, and she had like a basement flat, and she I put foil in the windows so that no one would see it and soundproofed the whole thing. And she was planning it for ages. And then when it came down to it, I was too scared to get the train into London to go to my friend's very secure little Christmas party, because we weren't allowed to. And now I look back on that and I'm like, I'm so angry. I'm particularly I'm very angry about the age group stuff as well, because I believe that the younger you are, the more you suffered. So it's not boohoo me, I'm talking 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, anyone in school. Yeah. This is unbelievable. Like, along with police, I'm terrified of the school system that it went ahead with the mask thing. That
disgusting.
means
Absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, there must be so few of them in there that can think to the level that I would trust them.
Absolutely, no, I'd have to agree with that.
Yeah. So it's been a bloody shocking 3 years. I wanted to check, are you an optimist or a pessimist?
I'm an optimist, mate. I'm
So,
always an optimist, and as much as all this stuff has been quite difficult at times, I always feel like there are way more good people on this planet than there are bad, and we would eventually win.
yeah, I feel like there's inevitability about it. I mean, first of all, they're kind of trying to create a Tower of Babel thing here. That's what globalism is. It's basically the Tower of Babel myth. Um, and you cannot do that. It appears to be a sort of law of the universe. I also heard someone recently talking about like Klaus Schwab's sort of transhumanist plans and his ideations and whether it's even possible, as in, can you actually like put that chip in there and get a person to do that? Well, no. This is kind of the mad ramblings of a fantasist, and I find that quite yeah. So I think these plans are so ridiculous that they can't work
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah. I'm not sure. I believe a lot of the stuff that they come out with. You know, that all the stuff they're talking about the World Economic Forum, about what they can do to you, how they're going to do it to you. I think they use that to kind of frighten people a little bit. I'm sure there is some technology there that we're not privy to, but the lengths that they're kind of going to, you just wonder how are they going to get. I just think how are they going to get humans to actually accept that? And then I think, well, actually, they got a lot of people to accept wearing a mask that was fucking useless. So they probably think they can get away with it again. And I reckon that was kind of why they did it. Just to test the compliance and see how many people that they could get to do the most stupid things. And unfortunately, there was quite a lot of them.
Well, that kind of twigged for me part of the way through it that what was going on here was all compliance tests, and to be honest, the only way out of lockdown is to resist lockdown. And I actually believe, because I remember the week quite clearly, I was doing a lot of filming then and ended up on Parliament Square basically every day with the same we're still supposed to be in lockdown. But it had hit that point. It had hit that point where we're in lockdown and actually like hundreds of people are just at Downing Street every single day.
Yeah.
Like, this is untenable. And if you keep it going on, no one's even going to believe there was a virus.
Yeah, but we're not allowed to debate that kind of stuff because that's another thing that kind of was a massive red flag to me early on, was that there was no credible debate going on. We weren't allowed to hear both sides of the story. All you got the whole time was just one side of the story. When I knew that there were people who were disagreeing with what was going on, scientific people who thought lockdowns were madness, and yet you weren't allowed to express that opinion on television. And at that point, that's kind of when actually this is pure propaganda, because they're just giving us one side of the story, and not only that, they're repeating it over and over again, which, as we know, is one of the most effective forms of brainwashing, is to just repeat.
Yeah, hands, face, space. I mean, one of the ones
Nonsense.
one of the ones that was absolute nonsense was stay alert. For what?
For what? See if you could see the virus. Whoa.
Yeah, stay alert for this symptomless thing that could be anywhere at any point, and anyone could get and can survive on anything. Stay alert for everything. Well, yeah, it was just
Nonsense.
horrible. Yellow and black wasp tape over everything. I'm having so many flashbacks to like playgrounds with all this tape around it. Horrible.
It was. There's some bad times, and I think when I look back on it now, I know my family and a few of my friends thought I was going mad because I was, going against everything basically. And I don't know, maybe to a certain extent, I did get a bit over obsessed with what was going on because there was nothing else to do. You couldn't do anything else, so I was just, fighting the machine basically. And yeah, I think there were times when my family were worried about my mental health, but I was always felt like I was in control. Maybe, as I said, a little bit too obsessed with everything and kind of neglecting family matters maybe a little bit at times. So I had to readdress that and get a bit of a better balance in my life, which hopefully I've managed to do now. But I will still always be in this fight. That there's a lot of injustices that need to be righted before I'm gonna be happy to shut down my Twitter account and my Getter account and and just go back to playing golf a couple of times a week and doing a bit of work.
Oh, I know, it'd be lovely. I want to get a DJ residency again, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. But no, yeah, you highlighted like the TV. I think that's the kicker. I think the only brainwashed, well, not the only brainwashed people, but if you're plugged into the TV for your news rather than something like Twitter, then I really think that's the problem. Because as much as Twitter is censorious and like the Elon's going to save the day with these Twitter files or whatever, I've found it an incredibly useful resource. And I did lose my Twitter account a few months ago, and it was gutting because that was how I got all of my vaccine injured guests. That was how I got in contact with everyone that I spoke to who was injured or bereaved. Like, there is Telegram, but Twitter was so quick, and that's why I find it actually like very harsh, because it's not that I want my Twitter so that I can grow my following and show off my clever person thoughts. It's that a phone book got deleted, and I did have some lined up that I didn't have any, because I just put the call out. I said anyone who's injured or bereaved and is on Twitter. So these aren't necessarily people that are connected to us in the UK or anything.
Yeah.
I had stuff lined up with them, and that was just gone like that. So it does have an effect beyond like, oh no, my profile.
Yeah, no, absolutely it does. But yeah, I'm not quite sure how I escaped a Twitter ban, but I had several of my tweets were investigated, and I got emails back going, "We're investigating your tweet. You said this," and then it came back and went, "No, you're all right." So I managed to tread the line quite carefully, apparently.
There's no rhyme or reason to it. Mine was something about the mermaids, the trans children charity. I tweeted something not so supportive of that charity when stuff came out about them, and that was the one that got me done. It was nothing to do with yeah,
bizarre. Yeah, I think the whole television thing, that the news, the BBC. I stopped paying my TV license in May of 2020 because I just couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear it anymore. It was just so doom laden. Every single program that was on, and it was just, you just thought, geez, what is going on here? So I just went, nah, stop that. I'm not watching that anymore. So I switched all the news channels off and stopped paying my TV license. And I've had about 12 letters since, but they never do anything.
No, they won't do. But I do, yeah, I don't think you can underestimate sort of the role of the BBC in it, in keeping it all going. It's absolutely huge.
Yeah, and not just the BBC either. Even people like Sky News and ITV. I think you can't just label it all at the BBC, although they are a law unto themselves. Really, how they survived, covering up for the world, the country's most prolific paedophile for all those years, beggars belief, and people still give their money to them. So I'm not quite sure how they did that, but obviously the brainwashing is strong.
Yes, it is. But as you say, you're an optimist, and like, so have you been impressed with the people and the public? Because it's very hard to gauge. You'll be in certain settings and everyone is double jabbed and blah blah, or triple or four or whatever we're on now, and no one's really thought about it, and you're the odd one out. But I've been to so many of these protests, like the one a few weeks ago, and I would say my gauge on how well we're doing is actually just looking at what their plans were. So we got rid of the vax passports. I know people say for now, but I think we did. I don't think there's any chance of you being like, I don't know. I think we've done really well.
I think well, certainly in this country, I think we've done a lot better than a lot of other countries. I think we kicked up enough of a stink to let them know that we weren't gonna be having what their plans were for us. And so definitely the vaccine mandates, went on that the 100K NHS march. When those mandates got rescinded, which I thought was a huge victory. The size of that protest was, absolutely huge. So that was a pretty impressive thing. The whole masking thing, we've still got masks in some countries on public transport and all that kind of stuff, and places in America still trying to bring back masks, but it's absolute nonsense. So I think we've done pretty well in this country. In fact, it's just little victories as well that kind of makes me smile and makes my heart jump a little bit. And I had one of those a few weeks ago when the nearest garage to my house, it's got like a little Greggs in it and a Subway. And so forever, it's had these bloody screens up, just like a plastic screen. So like the virus can't go over the top of that or anything like that. Do you know what I mean? If it exists. And so they had all these screens there. It's been there for like 2 years. And every time I go in the garage, I'm like, really? What is it? And then I walked in the garage about 3 weeks ago. And honestly, my heart jumped because they'd taken these freaking useless plastic screens down. And I just looked at it and I went, oh, thank God for that. And it's just another visual reminder that we are getting somewhere, and I think we are winning, and we are doing things to their plans that they don't like. And so, I do believe we are. It's going to be a long battle because they ain't going to stop. They're not going to give up, but neither are we. And I will continue in this fight until we get some kind of justice for the people that have been injured by the jabs. But also get these people out of office who were the ones that took us into these measures in the first place.
I think that's the thing, is that when you're sitting where we are and you know the full facts of the damage that's done, and you've been following it for a long time, so you know it was always based on nothing, to see still absolutely no acknowledgement and the kind of things that Hancock said about Bridgen, it's surprising that stuff can still shock me, because sort of nothing shocks me anymore. But actually, no, I think I do find this shocking, that in the sense of, well, how long are you going to keep going with this? Because all it does is make people incredibly angry. There's no benefit to you putting this off, I don't think.
Well, I mean, the whole, keeping going to make people angry is I think that they were expecting a lot more civil unrest, and I think they were expecting not just peaceful protests. I think they were expecting worse than that. And speaking to a couple of people who were talking about the fighting age men that are coming across illegally into this country and being housed in hotels up and down the country. There was people talking about those guys being trained up to actually, be there to police any civil disobedience, and knowing that they're foreigners, they don't have any affinity to the people in this country, and they will probably gladly strong arm themselves. If any civil disobedience took place, they wouldn't think twice about harming or injuring the public.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard this theory for a while, but it's kind of clicked into place with me. Are they, in the theory, receiving the training once they're here in the hotels for this? So I don't know how this is working. It's very confusing.
No, it is very confusing. You don't know what to believe. I'm not saying that is what they're here for. I just find it a little bit odd that we're allowing this to happen, and we're putting them up around the country and giving them money to spend, and yet we do literally zero for our poorest people in this country, and these people seem to be getting priority over our own. I grew up believing that charity begins at home and you sort your own out first.
Yeah, I think this is it. This is a twist in the tale. I've prior to COVID, I was kind of involved in nationalism, as you would call it, anything that the mainstream media would refer to as far right. You know, that was the buzzword before anti-vaxxers. But like this is what's going on here is essentially the natives are at the bottom of the pile for everything. And this, if you understand the concept of globalism, like it's against the natives of everywhere. So there's nothing wrong with you standing up for your own where you are. And to be honest, I have a massive problem with people fleeing their country en masse, really.
Yes.
I very much feel it's my responsibility to sort out my nation if there's a problem and not run away. So I don't really buy the whole they're fleeing thing unless
No.
yeah.
It doesn't make sense, especially, you know, from countries that aren't certainly in conflict with anybody else. That doesn't make any sense, and yet we're not given any information about that. It's all kind of kept very much under wraps, and they try and hide everything. And you have to rely on investigative journalists to go and film these people in the hotels, and you know, just to prove that it is actually happening, because the government will tell you nothing. And so that doesn't inspire any trust in governments at all. So, you know, if my trust in the government could get any lower, I mean, it has, because of the fact that they just turn a blind eye to stuff and only tell you about the stuff that they want you to hear about.
Well, I think this is, you know, the difficult realization, or the hump that everyone has to go over, is that the government would be willing to do this. That's the real realization. Is just coming to terms with, oh, not only do they not care about you, I think they might want you gone.
They might be poisoning you. You never know. They might be forcing you to, or coercing, not quite forcing, but coercing you to take experimental jabs that you know, they tried to hide the data, safety data, for 75 years from us, and now we're seeing what that data is, and it ain't looking good for them. And I'm not sure, you know, how much longer the mainstream media can turn a blind eye to all this stuff.
Sorry, I've just remembered the other thing I was going to say that was relative to like the topic of the native population, which was you must be aware of the statistics of the uptake rate in BAME populations compared to native British-born populations. And, you know, God bless everyone that saw through it and refused it and that. And actually, when you go on those protests through areas like Brixton, the reception you get is amazing, particularly from bus drivers. They loved it. But it kind of terrifies me that, you know, if you take all of these things in tandem, the mad immigration coming over on the boats, the fact that, I mean, there's an agenda against to just sort of demonize anyone that cares about this stuff. Is a long thing, calling stuff like the British Nationalist Party like fascist for daring to believe in this kind of stuff. I mean, you tie all of that together with the vaccine uptake rate of natives and non-natives. I mean, put this all together.
I think I read something about the Kalergi plan, and I think that's probably something that is not a conspiracy theory from the evidence that we're seeing play out before us at the moment.
You've really gone in the deep end there, Matt. And what I find most interesting about a concept like the Kalergi plan is that by mentioning it, you are an evil person for believing that somebody could be that evil. You're not the one doing it, but you will instantly become, oh my God, I can't believe his foul ideas.
Not my idea. It's all there in black and white. Go and read it.
It is a little bit, and it's bloody terrifying. And I, you know, as someone that was aware of that prior to 2020, I'm pretty glad to see, like, I saw the Light paper share the Kalergi plan the other day, and it's like, just as long as everyone's on the same page and kind of catching up at the same time, what we do seem to be moving as one. I mean, chemtrails was an interesting one. There was just a point somewhere in this, when everyone kind of went, yeah, that's real. That's
Yeah, I know. It was pretty obvious, wasn't it? I mean, the skies, geez. I mean, there were some serious cloud formations that I wasn't taught when I was a kid, put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we spot it every morning on the way to work now. We've been going for a while now. We haven't focused on the protest in London. Like as I said, you gave a terrific speech, but then so did everyone that day.
Absolutely, they did. Yeah,
I was really taken aback by how well the people who've been invited to speak spoke, because they're not public speakers.
No, it's a very difficult thing to do, and I think they spoke from their heart, spoke with passion, and I think they did. Everyone did a fantastic job.
Yeah, it was wonderful. It's not the first one you'd been to, though. You said you'd been to the NHS 100K.
Yeah, it's the first one I've ever spoken at, though.
Yeah, yeah, and how was that? You know.
Yeah, as I said, I felt a bit out of place because as I mentioned in my speech, it was meant to be about the vaccine injured and the bereaved, and it was only when John Watt had spoken to and he'd said to me, no, he said we would really like you to speak. You've been standing up for us. You've been a big advocate for us. So if you would do that, we would be very grateful.
My name's John Watt. I'm actually interested in the vaccine, and Piers Morgan decided to block me this morning. All I asked him was if he would be interested in interviewing the vaccine injured and bereaved, and for some weird reason the man's just blocked me.
All right, John, I'm not sure. That's between you and him. That's nothing to do with me, so I'm going to say goodbye right now, and thank you for calling.
So with that, I then was happy to stand up there, and I'll be honest, when I wrote the speech, there was no swear words in it. But what I did find while I was up there is some of the anger and frustration of the last couple of years came out a little bit, especially when it comes to, the PPC, the Paedophile Protecting Corporation that was just behind us. And I did drop a couple of F-bombs, which weren't really supposed to be there. But that was just in the moment, and I felt passionate about it, and I feel that our government has truly let these people down. They trusted them, they took their jabs, and they've been injured, and now they've just been forgotten. I think it's absolutely disgusting.
It's literal insult to injury, isn't
it?
A really serious insult to a really serious injury. It's
exactly.
Yeah, and again, this is what gets to me. Why is this falling to people like us? It's insane that it's falling to like Matt Le Tissier, ex-footballer. What possible role do you have in this? And it ends up being quite an important one. There's no logic to it.
No, there is no logic to it. But I guess you could look at it and think, well, maybe you were put on this earth for this very moment, and you've got a job to do, and you stand up and you do it. And I've taken the slings and arrows, and quite frankly, they've been very easy to bat off, because when I feel so passionate and feel like I'm so right about something, nothing will distract me. Not even the 77th Brigade, who like to troll my tweets, and they get short thrift, and I'm very good at muting and blocking, and putting that out of my mind and not allowing that negativity into my life.
Did you used to engage on Twitter?
Oh, I engaged a lot. I mean, I found Twitter was great fun. Pre-2020, I used to have fantastic debates and take the piss out of people all the time. All good-natured. And a lot of it was just debating stuff that happened on football pitches in football matches, and football supporters, you get very passionate, and I would engage, and I'd have long conversations, and it was fun. It was fun. Nobody took it too seriously. And then March of 2020, all of a sudden, it stopped becoming fun, and everybody got really serious and very polarized. and not in a good way, in a nasty way, and it just it stopped being fun then, and it just became about trying to get your message across, and I kind of stopped actually reading the replies to my tweets for quite a while. That's been an interesting one as well, actually. I would say probably 95% of all the replies I was getting were very negative. And what I have noticed is that over the last year or so, there's been a huge shift. And I would say probably now 90% of the replies that I get are very supportive and very positive towards me.
Nice. I mean, yeah, that tells us where we are, because it's so difficult to gauge. You know, you can't judge it off our protest movement, because that's not a representative sample size. You can't judge it off anything that's shown on the TV. So how do you get a gauge on this? And I think you're probably right that was it daily? No, it's local news articles. That's what, because young woman in my town died suddenly at 35. And you go on the comments of that page where it's not quickly moderated, or I suppose they're all paywalled now, aren't they? The Times and the Telegraph. Who's paying for this?
I know. What idiots are doing that?
I know, it's bizarre. But yeah, no, I noticed in the local news, when somebody has died suddenly, it's pretty unanimous in the comments, because there's no response to it, is it? You know, it's happened to me where somebody that my mum knew, her daughter died. You know, that's awful, isn't it? There's someone that's about my age just dropped dead, and they know my opinion on this stuff, and it's like they don't even have to ask. It's like I pretty much just pull a face. It's like, well, I'm doing my bit. I talk to these guys. I know how bad it is. You know, I need you guys to join in at some point.
Yeah, and it's really hard because you know, facts don't resonate with these people. They're so indoctrinated that it's really difficult to actually get through to them, because our fact that their emotions are, you know, so high that they don't get, that our facts don't penetrate their emotions. You know, they don't look at things factually. So what I found is that it's much better to actually just drop questions into people rather than bombard them with facts. Is just drop some subtle questions in and go, oh, I wonder why that was. Why? Oh, she just dropped dead. Blimey, I wonder what could have caused that. And then just leave them wondering, and just hope that somewhere, you know, later on in that day they think back and go, oh, that was a strange response. Why did he say that? I might go and have a look.
Yeah.
And I think the best gauge that I could really have has been from my circle of family and friends, and the difference in their attitudes towards it now than what it was 2.5 years ago. And there's been a big change.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it's a tough thing to come to terms with, the scale of it. So I understand that it has to be a slow process, but that question of, like, how do you wake people up? I mean, I think we all gave up on that after about
I think we did.
Well, because there's so much. The conclusion I've come to on that one is there's so much evidence. You can look any which way you like, PCR tests or average age of death 82, like any of this. Well, on any strand, it's a choice. It's a choice to look into it, or a choice to not look into it.
You just want to stay. Yeah, you just want to stay in your little matrix and not really feel uncomfortable in the truth. They would rather have a convenient lie than an uncomfortable truth.
But at the same time, I wonder, okay, well, they've already, you know, pierced your skin several times and injected you with something that you don't know anything about. Is that not enough? Obviously, it's not enough. But I mean, like you mentioned how Twitter was ruined for you by all of this. Suddenly you had to pick a side and you didn't get to have your football banter anymore. And I think that's the point of totalitarianism, is that at some point it comes for that stuff that you care about, right? You can't go, oh, I don't like I've got one friend left who's not like us, right? And is not interested, but he won't give up on me. And so I can't give up on him either. Like it's just good banter between the pair of us. And it's like you were mentioning your smart friends. It's like this guy's better at statistics than I am, and science and all the rest of it. And at this stage in the game, I'm basically just bullying him, going like, well, come on, you should be smarter than me. and yet you don't know about any of this, do you? Do you even know what? I don't know. I'm trying to drag him along, but maybe nothing will happen.
Some people are just so far lost that you can't save everybody. That's what I've realised.
No, but I think you've been welcome on some platforms where I think you can make a difference. You know, GB News is like a fence sitting type platform, and you've been on there quite regularly.
Yeah, I've been on the Dan Wotton show. I've been on his panel a couple of times. I've phoned in a few times when they want to talk about various topics, and I do try and get in. I've always tried to get in a little dig somewhere along the line. I was on the panel and we had to nominate Britain's Greatest Britain, and this was in the lead up to the protest. So I nominated Fiona, just so that I could, get in there that there is this protest on Saturday and this is what it's about, and so just little things I can try and get in there.
My nominee is Fiona Hine, who was the organiser behind the 100k NHS protest last year, which helped to get the mandates rescinded. And she has also organised a protest for this coming Saturday to allow the vaccine injured in this country to have a voice.
But I do still think sometimes, when you see a story like the Pfizer, the Project Veritas Pfizer stuff that went on, and they don't react to that. They don't do a story on that at all. It does dishearten you a little bit that maybe. Why would they not? I mean, nearly 30 million people have viewed it on Twitter alone. And yet this massive story that's blown up, everybody in the mainstream media is just turning a blind eye to it. And even GB News turned a blind eye to it. And so I was a little bit disheartened by that when it came to GB News, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I mean, I heard Abby Roberts point out that the march wasn't on the Neil Oliver show that night. And it's like, it should be, really.
Yeah.
It should be. There's no reason why that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a bit frustrating, and I do keep trying. I don't want to burn bridges because they do give me a platform and a chance to speak. I'll just keep trying to do as much as I can.
No, I've noticed it along the way. I remember with Nana, you had your pin badge on, didn't you? That was good. Always diverting attention towards it.
You're wearing a little. What's that about?
That's the Vaccine Injury Bereaved Group. Okay. Just trying to shine a little bit of a light on the people that have been injured, that are kind of being ignored by our government at the moment, and I think our government have behaved disgracefully in the way that they've treated those people. So just try and highlight it any opportunity I can get.
What was good was she didn't know what it was, and she asked me about it, and so that gave me the opportunity to then go, oh, it's this, and I knew that she was very pro-vax, and her face when I told her what it was about, she couldn't change the subject quick enough.
It's just that stance of being pro-vax. It's like we're not even talking about that at this point. We're saying, can you invite John and Alex and everyone else onto your sofa to tell their stories, please? Yeah. That's what we're talking about here. This isn't about like, oh, are you in favor of vaccines?
Yeah, I mean, they did have. I think Dan Wotton had Claire Hibbs on last week, so awesome. So that was a nice one. He had a couple of people on there, so that was kind of a little bit of a breakthrough.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the thing with GB News is like you can't say that they're not doing their bit and that they've never covered it. And then you can also, I know people have traced like Bill and Melinda Gates funding through it, but it's not perfect and we do what we can is kind of
no, that's exactly right.
yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. But I do miss Mark Stein, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he was a real trooper.
Yeah, that actually, no, there's one more bit on GB News I want to just ask you about, which was that incident with Leo Kearse.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we have seen some deaths from myocarditis and other results from the vaccine, but also COVID. COVID actually leads to a higher risk of heart disease. So, I mean, you can also say that the vaccine has saved a lot of people from heart disease. I mean, I think it's easy to focus on a few examples of athletes falling over and say, oh, this shows that the vaccine doesn't work. But the figures show. The figures show. I'm not sure I still trust all the figures, but the figures show that COVID is actually more of a risk when it comes to heart disease. I mean, would you accept that?
I'm not sure what figures you've been seeing, but
I don't know. It makes me feel a certain way because, yeah, they can only say so much because they have to preserve whatever else Ofcom will do whatever they do. I didn't do that, right? And you didn't do that. And like, I'm not taking the bribe. I'm just going to tell the truth. And that's just how I feel about it. So, like, there's a limit to how much I can respect a GB News presenter, you know?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, I get where you're coming from entirely.
Yeah, but as we say, like you've got an in there, and it's better that you got that than you don't. So like I'm really glad that you came down to and spoke at that protest because I think that was I've been to so many of them, and that was the most impactful on a soul level for me. I think that you mentioned the NHS 100K, and I remember the feel of that one being really, really tense because those guys were about a fortnight away from losing their jobs. So that one,
a few weeks,
yeah, it's something like that. So that one really meant something, but I think this one beat that out of the park. To be honest, there it just felt like, yeah, this really matters. Everyone who's showed up today is doing something so important. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was great that they're going to continue the truth be told through March as well, with another few events in March. So that's great that they're not just going to just do the 1 month, and we need to keep pushing this until these people get recognised.